working with other centers, there's a couple examples. So, the COT Space Act Agreement was a funded Space Act Agreement where NASA was paying us, to co-invest in development of new systems. There are also examples of where we go to NASA centers and we pay for services that we need that usually can only be found at these NASA centers with a reimbursable Space Act Agreement where we pay NASA. So probably the best example of that is Stennis, where we needed to do an acceptance test of these AJ-26 main engines. And originally, Aerojet had tested these on their own test stand out in Sacramento. But for a variety of reasons, they weren't able to make that test stand available to this program. So we were left with approaching there's a national board, National Propulsion Test Board, I think, that's located actually at Marshall, that is savvy on all of the different government test venues that exist between the Air Force AFRL sites and NASA facilities, mainly at Stennis, but also at Marshall. And we're able to tell them what our requirements were in terms of thrust, type of propellants, duration, and so on. And that board then goes and finds solutions for the user. And so they recommended, really it was between AFRL and Stennis, and we did a bunch of site surveys and so on and determined that Stennis would be most appropriate for a number of reasons. And I think it was a great selection. They converted the E1 test stand from a horizontal test orientation. They dug a trench for us and made it into a vertical capability because that's the orientation that we would be flying in, and also to just for other structural reasons as well. And I can't say enough good about the Stennis crew, the engineers, technicians. They were able to configure that stand rapidly. They gave us a lot of advice about how to test the engines. They acted as the test conductor for the acceptance test. We really had a joint team. It was Aerojet. They handled the engine. They were very good to work with in terms of they installed all the ordnance, they installed all the instrumentation. They were the technical experts on the engine. Stennis did it. Handled the test stand. They acted as the test conductors. They came up with the countdown and so on, and they're the ones who operated the controls and made sure that the propellants were going to be flowing and so on, as well as the data acquisition system. And then Orbital ATK, we were the customer, as well as we had the engine controls. So we were the ones who were going to be vectoring the engine. We were going to be igniting it and shutting it down and operating the throttle and the mixture ratio valves during the test, and ultimately agreeing to the test profile and making sure the test was a success. So it was a great combined team. We ended up doing, I think it was upwards of 17 to 20 tests, 17 different engines, I think. Some of them were tested twice, so I think it was near 19 or 20 tests at Stennis. Can't say enough about their willingness to do whatever it took to get a test off on a certain day. If we had a broken piece of flex hose, they would be off digging around finding a spare for us. They had a machine shop. They could make fittings. They would clean stuff that needed to be cleaned, and they were just outstanding to work with. You can't just go down the road and find Joe's rocket test facility that you can hire. This kind of capability and this kind of experience really only exists, I think, at NASA and probably at the AFRL locations out in California as well. So that was absolutely vital to getting these engines through test. We had some issues in some of the tests, and they were great to work with to help resolve them and help us be successful.